Russia's foreign ministry says U.S. authorities will be violating the immunity of its diplomats if they go on with a planned FBI search of the Russian consulate in San Francisco. Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said the demand to search the consulate and the diplomats' accommodation is, quote, a direct threat to the security of Russian citizens. She expressed Moscow's resolute protest over Washington's actions that ignore international law. This after the U.S. State Department asked Moscow to close its consulate in San Francisco and two annex buildings in Washington and New York City. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov earlier warned the U.S. of a harsh response over the consulate move.
We will have a tough response to the things that come totally out of the blue to hurt us and are driven solely by the desire to spoil our relations with the United States.
Lavrov added that the new anti-Russia move by Washington is designed to prevent President Donald Trump from using his constitutional powers to the full in order to influence the U.S. foreign policy. The top Russian diplomat blamed former U.S. administration for the current exchange of sanctions between Moscow and Washington, but he stressed that any normalization of ties must be reciprocal and based on mutual respect. To get more insight into the worsening relationship between Moscow and Washington, let's go live to the Russian capital, Moscow, to talk to Fred Weir, journalist and political commentator. Mr. Weir, it's good to have you here with us on Press TV's Top 5. So the question is, how come things between Russia and the U.S. got to this point of fighting over the consular buildings, their diplomats, and the worsening situation? How far will this go, in your opinion, and how will this escalation of tensions between the two sides affect other global issues in which the two countries are involved?
Well, that's a big question. Well and truly into what people are calling a downward spiral, and it's getting out of control. I mean, it is acquiring a nasty edge to it. This threat, I think it's not a threat, I think it's an intention to search the consulate and the diplomat. Is just gratuitous. I mean, its purpose can only be to humiliate them, and that's over the top, in my opinion. And it will receive a response in Russia. I think they're counting on it. And that will just drive the spiral faster and harder.
And Mr. Wade, it seems like it's a tit for tat that's getting worse by the day. Something Russia says, a threat made by the U.S., another move by the two sides. How do you think the situation got to this point?
Well, we have to remember, I guess, that last December, when then President Obama expelled 35 Russian diplomats and seized two diplomatic facilities, allegedly, I mean, in response to alleged Russian interference in the American election, President Putin in Russia did hold off on retaliating. He created a window to turn that around. And it was only really last month when the U.S. Congress passed this very punitive sanctions bill that he gave the green light to the foreign ministry to retaliate, and they did. They cut American diplomatic staff in Russia to the same level that staff is in Russian staff in the United States. So that was bad. I mean, that created the bad atmosphere and pretty much blocked any chance for improvement. But now the Americans have taken it a step further, closure of a consulate and this very humiliating search plan. The Russians will respond and will get something different perhaps, but equally harsh, and will be driving down that spiral further and further. And I don't see how it could be improved now at this point.
And briefly, Mr. Weir, who would benefit inside the U.S., if we want to focus on the circles inside the U.S. who want a worsening of relations with Moscow?
Well, that's it. I think that there is an attempt in the Trump administration and in all the people who oppose him inside his own administration to hamstring him so that he can't do anything pro-Russian or that is perceived as moving toward Russia in a friendly way. And this is the sort of thing, creating a really acrimonious atmosphere that will help them.
Okay, thank you so much, Fred Weir, journalist and political commentator, joining us live from the Russian capital, Moscow. Thank you very much.